An embarrassment on Cadillac's debut always seemed possible for F1's newest team, but it now looks more likely to humiliate another team than embarrass itself. The demands of starting a brand new F1 team from scratch are massive, especially when going from entry approved to F1 race debut in just over 12 months like Cadillac is up to do. So our expectations and those internally at the team were extremely realistic, with the only real competitive goal worth setting being inside the 107% cutoff in qualifying, then being reliable enough to finish races. If things went wrong, failing to meet those objectives was plausible. That would be embarrassing. And all expectations are still that Cadillac will be at the back, but it looks set to start life as a respectable backmarker, and maybe even start the season outdoing a much bigger, much more established team with great F1 names attached to it. In doing so, Cadillac will send an important message to F1 and the watching world, but one that its immediate rivals have already received. This is a team that's had to build everything from scratch. When we see a shiny F1 car break cover, we don't see the complexity underneath, and so much gets taken for granted. Other teams know though. Remember, Cadillac has had to navigate setting up a new factory, new tools, new garage equipment, new systems, new processes, new everything, just to immediately test itself in a competitive and technically brutal championship. Team principal Graham Loudon told us he's been receiving messages from rival teams throughout pre-season who are very aware of the job Cadillac's done. These aren't polite plaudits or patronising messages of, "Oh, haven't you done well?" It's genuine recognition from people who are in the middle of sorting their own cars and problems out, sincerely saying, "Well done, we know how hard this is," and treating Cadillac as an equal. That matters considering Cadillac had very few friends in the paddock when trying to get an entry, and Loudon knew it had a big job to do to be taken seriously. It's not coming in threatening to upset the status quo straight out of the blocks, but Cadillac's completed serious mileage, avoided looking embarrassingly off the pace, and looks like it belongs on and off the track. Doing that and having its work noted by rival teams was actually the team's first milestone beyond the obvious get a car on track. And as there are one or two other teams in trouble, Cadillac being right at the upper end of the backmarker credibility means it is genuinely on the radar as a potential early season rival. Don't get us confused, Cadillac's still probably going to be last in Australia, going to struggle to score any points this season, and likely going to be the 11th team in the championship. But underachieving rivals are starting to realise it can't actually take beating this team for granted. Testing's just testing and the picture can change quickly, but if the season opener took place immediately after pre-season testing ended in Bahrain, Cadillac would have a great chance of beating Aston Martin. Adrian Newey's Honda-powered super team has had an awful start to 2026, with an engine that's too unreliable, lacking performance, and limiting what can be understood about the car itself. It needs a significant improvement in reliability to realistically make the finish with both cars in Australia, which shows just how easy it is to get a brand new set of rules badly wrong. And even if it can make it to the end, what kind of form will that be in? The Aston Martin Honda package was about as far off the pace as Cadillac in Bahrain over a single lap, and couldn't run for long enough to provide a real reference for its race stint prospect. We absolutely expect it to have greater immediate performance potential as a result, but will the car run enough for that to actually be tapped into? Or could it be the same or even worse if the engine's having to run conservatively to complete a race distance? Cadillac won't be drawn into public declarations about beating Aston Martin, but whether by retirement or an actual pace, it is a genuine target for Cadillac. That prospect might be blown out of the water by Friday in Melbourne, but it's a great source of motivation for that team to have someone to aim for. Loudon says it would change everything to have a competitor on track, especially if it ends up in a direct development race against someone and can benchmark itself properly. The early Aston Martin Honda disaster is part of critical context for us understanding what could have tripped Cadillac up, and how well it has done to avoid any major red flags heading to Melbourne. Okay, Ferrari customer Cadillac hasn't got its own engine yet, so hasn't had to worry about that side of things. But you can also look at Williams, which botched its car build, for a clear example of what a team can misjudge and the problems it can cause itself even when the engine's been taken care of. There were testing niggles, but nothing that leaves the team scrambling for fixes, quite the opposite actually. Loudon says he goes to Australia as assured he can be that both cars are capable of making it to the finish there. And actually Williams was so underwhelming in Bahrain testing that it didn't look like Cadillac was miles adrift of that team at the very back of the midfield group. So yes, we still expect both Cadillacs out in Q1, probably 3 or 4 seconds off the pace, and with the lowest ultimate potential of any team in the short term. But is it going to be so far off that it can't be a single car that messes up qualifying or the race? No. Is it in such disarray that it's the least prepared team? No. Imagine if Cadillac was the team that missed the first Barcelona test, or got to Bahrain and was struggling to do multi-lap runs. Imagine if Cadillac got itself into such a problematic situation that it only did 6 untimed laps on the final day of testing. It would be lambasted as unfit for purpose that it underestimated the challenge of F1 and serve as proof that those who didn't want to let it onto the grid were right all along. So while it's hard to say this without sounding as patronising as some of the questions posed to Loudon along the lines of, are you starting to feel like a real F1 team now? Starting the year looking like it can beat another team on merit is the equivalent of a win for Cadillac. And if you want to know the inside line on how Cadillac starts the year in Melbourne, make sure you're signed up to the Race Members Club, where you can get exclusive behind the scenes content. Right now you can claim 90% off your first month, just head to the link in the description. Remember what F1 said about an earlier version of this project when its entry was initially rejected. We do not believe that the applicant would be a competitive participant. Those were the words from F1's statement as part of the justification for dismissing what was still more overtly a Michael Andretti-led project, but had many of the same key individuals involved and ultimately similar intentions. There's no doubt what the entry eventually morphed into to get approval is something quite different and more credible. General Motors co-owns the team alongside TWG Global, which also owns Andretti, but that name has been shuffled out of the picture. An initial Renault engine deal wouldn't have been possible even if that entry was granted first time around, because Renault's withdrawn as an engine manufacturer, and replacing it with a Ferrari supply is undeniably a better foundation. The point is, it would be unfair to hang F1 by its own words where this team is concerned, because it's not the same, and it is in a better place for being forced into its eventual composition. And yet it is an interesting point of reference. At times this project has had to battle the clear implication it wouldn't be a proper or a credible team, often hidden behind that notion of not being competitive. But there are two important things to consider here. The first is that 2026 is just the beginning. It is about establishing a respectable ground zero to achieve much bigger goals in the years to come. Whatever state Cadillac is in this year shouldn't define its entire competitive merit. The second thing is that Cadillac is proper. The core competitive demands of the F1 team have been taken seriously, and the key choices for 2026 have been grounded in reality, without taking all the shortcuts it could have. It's been pragmatic with its initial targets on the car side by not pushing production deadlines too hard or being over ambitious with the starting point of the aerodynamic design itself. But it has decided to build its own gearbox casings and rear suspension rather than take the whole hog from Ferrari, which is a big design and manufacturing undertaking and actually gives Cadillac a bigger workload than some customer teams like Haas or Williams. And the reward for making sure it got the basics right is starting the season neck and neck with a team that is back to the hilt with hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, a brand new factory, a new works engine deal, and Adrian Newey running the show. Of course, if Cadillac goes through the year drifting further away, getting lapped 2 or 3 times every race, that's not okay. As Loudon says, a good pre-season means nothing if we don't build on it. But Cadillac at least looks likely to start 2026 able to give the best possible account of itself, be a very respectable debutant, and maybe claim an unlikely scalp in the process.